Hey, Tim Garno here with Fabris 1301. How are you? Hey, it's the beginning of the year, and I just wanted to speak about something here that I'm pretty passionate about, and it's near and dear to me, and that is what are the benefits of an adult fencer potentially trying out historical fencing? My personal experience is I was a former saber fencer. I reached the Division 1 level of competition. Certainly invested a ton of time in sport fencing. Think all the life lessons that you learn from all that training are invaluable. No one can certainly take them away from you. And but I wanted to share with you some benefits of historical fencing, and that is if you're an adult fencer and you've been at it for a while, or maybe you're new to fencing as an adult, so you didn't have the benefit, and I was new to, I started late in fencing. You didn't have the benefit of having all these lessons as a kid and all these basic foundations, and you're starting late, so you're basically playing catch up on everyone and the competitive circuit. And some benefits that I think to trying historical fencing is competitive shelf life. You know, the current climate for Olympic sport fencing, what's the average age for the Olympic team? I'd say if you were to take all three weapons and compile them, I think it's around 31, 32 years old on a good day. In historical fencing, I've seen people at high-level competitions in their 60s, and I know high-level competitors in their 60s that can absolutely still bring it. So if you really enjoy that spirit of competition, that camaraderie of competition, and you really want to still be able to compete at a high level, historical fencing might be something you want to try out. And there's reasons why. It's not because, hey, it's less competitive or there's no good fencers. No, it has nothing to do with that. One of the things that it has to do with is rule set. The rule set right now in Olympic sport fencing, it's just more conducive to athleticism and speed rather than technique and skill. And that's no slight on sport fencing. And that's not saying that Olympic competitors don't have awesome skills. They do. They do. But what I'm saying is the game in historical fencing, it's just been, the rule sets are more pure in the sense there's no right of way. So the scoring system, double touches are awarded differently at different tournaments. Meaning, if you double touch, you might just lose flat out. So if you were to take that extreme example, that slows down the fencing exponentially, which makes it more of a skillful technical bout. So for you adult fencers out there, I can tell you personally, making that switch over, I've noticed, you know what, I'm in my mid 40s now and I'm still able to be competitive and I can still learn and enjoy that competition and the learning aspect and continue to get better into my mid 40s. Like, I haven't seen any dropout from an athletic perspective. That doesn't mean that I don't take care of my body, because I certainly try to very much. But at the same time, I think if you're that type of person who really wants that pure form of fencing, be able to compete for a long time, historical fencing's competitive shelf life is long. Another thing is less strain on your muscles and joints. I think that rolls right up into competitive shelf life. Let's take saber, for example, in Olympic sport fencing. You can't cross over. Why? I don't know. They took it out. And to make it more sport friendly or whatever. Well, I don't know why they took it out, but the fact is if you have to do all these little advances and all it is lunging, or God willing, you can do the flunge at 50, you're on a crash course for an ACL tear on your knees. And I know a lot of guys that have come out of sport fencing with broken lower backs or ACL strains in their 30s and late 20s. So again, that really limits what you can do. Well, in historical fencing, natural steps are just natural steps. You can do them any point in time. And so therefore it takes a lot of the strain off your muscles and your joints, which means you can train longer, you get more out of your body, you can continue to improve, which means you can compete longer, which is just fantastic if you're that type of person. I think it's shortened learning curve. If you've done sport fencing for a long time, or you've really have some nice technique and lessons, you had a nice coach who taught you some good lessons technique-wise, well, then you're going to benefit from historical fencing, because we have lessons in sport fencing, we have classes for drills and all that in historical fencing, but another thing we have is treatises. And if you have the discipline, and you probably do if you're an avid sport fencer and was competitive, you're going to have that discipline to sit down with these treatises and just study them and study them. And there are so many gems in these treatises that really are going to blow your mind, and techniques that you can actually apply to some of the sport fencing, but you also get to see where it all started, which is pretty awesome from a legacy perspective. But also, you just try them out like you would if you were to take that lesson with your coach to figure out how it works for you in the same tempo and distance. You do the same thing with these historical actions. So when you make one work, you're like, I got it. And I can tell you that I've been studying these books now for the last 6 years, and it's amazing to see where I started jumping all around like a sport fencer at the beginning to now slowing things down and applying these methods, rules, techniques, actions, whatever you want to call it, into a historical fencing bout. And I'll tell you, from a personal reward perspective, to make that switch and also to learn this new way of fighting with a sword, it's pretty rewarding. And that also rolls up right into the last point, and that is cost. Let's face it, sport fencing is, I'd say, pretty expensive hobby, and I have some expensive hobbies. And but again, if you've got a family, or like I do, paying several hundreds and hundreds of dollars for lessons a month just might not be in the books. Well, there's tons of historical fencing tournaments probably in your region of the country, or there's clubs popping up all over the place. There's resources available for you to learn, and for a pretty nominal fee. And I'd say that historical fencing is 70% less than sport fencing. And also the equipment. I've bought a couple swords because I love swords, but I can tell you overall, the cost of my rapier that I've used the same rapier for 6 years, and I've had to replace the blade on it once. So compared to in saber, I was going through sabers once a month, easily, maybe two a month. So they just added up, and so the cost overall, the upfront cost of buying the sword's a little higher. But I can tell you, in the long run, you'll probably stick with the same sword forever. So anyways, if you have any questions, or if you want me to share more about my experience, I'm happy to share that with you. Because if you're an adult fencer out there and you're like, man, I still want to keep and enjoy that spirit of fencing, that creative spirit of fencing, or the competitive nature of fencing, it's all there in historical fencing. You might want to try it out. Have a good day.